Hey everyone. Before we start with the episode, I wanted to give a big shout out to a PayPal supporter that we had this month. Coach Doug Dorio, assistant men's basketball coach at Penn State Shenango, was very gracious and donated to our PayPal this month, and I can't say how appreciative I am for his support. If you want to support the show, you can do so at PayPal and find our username at bballteacherpod. Any donation is a huge help for our hosting fees for our audio or as a way to show support for the show. So, again, really appreciate it, Coach Dorio, for supporting the show. And with that, we're on to the episode.
Welcome to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Our mission is to bring you discussions on a wide array of topics in the coaching world to grow players on and off the court. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and also reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Now, here's your host, Coach Mike Hernandez.
Welcome back, everyone. Thank you guys so much for joining us here for another episode. As always, wherever in the world you're listening to us from, whatever platform you're listening to us on, thank you guys so much for checking us out. Thank you so much for all the questions that you've sent me, all of the messages, all the emails, all the things that you send me. I know I say it every episode, but no, I truly do appreciate hearing from you guys and love hearing all the suggestions that you guys have for topics and things that you want to hear about. And as I was just kind of talking about, I guess, before we started, I feel like this topic of getting players to buy into their roles and just the concept of player buy-in is more important maybe now than ever with the way that the landscape works in collegiate athletics, high school athletics. This concept of getting everyone to buy into their roles and really buy into what it is that they're doing on the court. It's so important, and that's what we're going to get into today. We're going to get into the concept of getting your players to buy into their roles, the concept of getting them to be elite at certain skill sets so that they're ready to fit in to whatever offense or scheme that you're going to be putting in, talking about how players' roles change, using practice to, refine and make them skilled in those roles. And also talk about a little bit of scouting, as well as a little bit about small college athletics and faith-based institutions. We're going to touch a lot here. So we're going to jump right in here. Very happy to be joined today by the men's basketball coach out at Carolina University, Coach Jacob Heck, joining us today. Again, Coach, thank you so much for being able to carve out some time to talk to us. How are things going?
I appreciate it. Excited to be here. Things are going well, hitting the ground running with recruiting and all that
Yeah.
comes with that. So,
Yeah, for sure. Coach, let's start with you. Go ahead and talk to us about your basketball journey and your coaching journey. Where has this great game taken you and this coaching journey taken you? And ultimately, how did you end up at Carolina University?
yeah. So, I mean, like I tell, I mean, I talk to recruits a lot about this. Is basketball is a unifier, it's a uniter, and it's something that connects us from all over the world, really. So, my journey starts in Rapid City, South Dakota, where I was born and raised. And honestly, growing up was not a huge basketball guy. I thought, I had more of a football build, and my dad was a golfer, and so I thought maybe it'd be more that way. But as I got into high school, hit a little growth spurt and got a great opportunity with my high school coaches. They really kind of took me in a tough little season there, and was able to really fall in love with the game. I got a chance to help my high school coach his son in their travel ball program. Even while I was still in high school, and was reffing some youth
Mm.
tournaments, and just found like basketball was it for me. I was addicted, loved it. And went off to college, and thought, I just maybe get a degree and come back and coach high school or something. But school kind of stunk without ball. So transferred to a small Christian university where I got a chance to get back into the playing, and worked my way up through the program. Started off as a manager scout team guy up through JV into varsity position. And after graduation, did go back and coach high school with my high school coach for a few years. I was also teaching, and found myself worrying a lot more about practice plans and scouting reports and watching game film than lesson planning. And kind of made the move. It was like, I got to get back, got to get to where that's the full-time gig. So took a chance to go back with my college coach again, and be his assistant. And we had a great year in Nebraska. It was the 2019-2020 season. So we qualified for the national tournament. Thought things were going great. And then the world shuts down, of course, and
Yeah.
our campus our campus closed. Like after we sent everybody home for COVID, 2, 3 weeks later, they were like, "Hey, yeah, we're not going to bring them back ever." So we were we were job hunting, and my head coach was far more appealing of a hire than myself. So he was able to get the head job out here and was gracious enough to bring me along with as the assistant. So we had a couple good years here together before he moved into admin, and I took over um, as a head coach. So just finished up my third season here at Carolina University as the head coach, my fifth season overall, and love it. You know, we have a great budding program. We've just recently been able to join the NAIA and compete at that level, and it's going really well. So I think that kind of
So it's
brings us
really
up to speed.
no, it's really cool to hear about all like the steps, right, that were there along the way, and hearing kind of your journey kind of just made me think about, Coach. I want to ask you about like what have you taken from all of those like previous steps to build up to your kind of your coaching philosophy now at Carolina University? Was there a lot that you like took from all of your previous stops? Was there stuff that you had to kind of like really figure out for the first time or really like, try and process? I'm just curious about how much was like, okay, I'm taking all this with me when I get this job versus like I got like a lot that I need to figure out on my own.
Yeah, I think both. I think both. Like there's definitely been a ton to figure out, especially with the move from the NCCAA to the NAIA. I mean, the NCCAA is great, and typically we're playing a lot of NAIA caliber institutions. We mirror much of those rules in the NCCAA, but um, like on a night to night basis, jumping into the NAI is it's just tougher. So we've had to adapt a lot and grow a lot. I would kind of liken it to, if you were playing, essentially if you were playing an independent schedule, in Division 1 or whatever, you would be that caliber of team. But if you
Hmm.
hopped from that up into say the Big 12, where every night it's a dogfight, I mean that's kind of what it felt like for us. It was like we were playing those teams, but it just got a lot tougher on a nightly basis. But I think I was able to bring a lot from those other stops too, because, my journey's kind of been, um, a build up,
Hmm.
start from the bottom and grow up. Like I said, I mean, even in high school, like I was, my coaches joke about it. I was the last kid kept on the freshman B team. I was last in.
Sure.
And after that, I was the only one that, really played college basketball. And so like I'm just, that's kind of my stories from the ground up, build up, compete. Um, and I think I brought that to the programs I've been a part of, and kind of tend towards those types of players. And I think that's a big part of what we do is, as a program and as our team, it's like we're gonna come in and we're gonna outwork. We're
Hmm.
gonna outwork. Of course, when we can get guys that have the great talent and that type of attitude. I mean, that's what makes us
Yeah.
really good. But I think that I'm attracted to players like that. I think those guys and I connect, and so I think our program is typically filled with guys that are out kicking their coverage, so to speak, in terms of what they're accomplishing.
Right. It's like something that you could like, it sounds like some you like quickly can like identify or connect with somebody like that, right? Like you're like,
Yeah.
I already can like foster that sort of like connection with you because of like your own experiences that you have. And now that's cool. Coach, I know something that you're really passionate about is kind of small college athletics as well as faith-based institutions. I know you also talked about making that jump from the NCCAA. So let me start with what about, that side of athletics is something that makes you particularly passionate? Why are you so passionate about that?
Yeah, I think for me, it is part of my story. Like the school that took me in was a small Christian college that allowed me to, um, compete and play, but it also developed me as a man. Like
Hmm.
for me, the faith-based institution is huge. Like that was a huge part of my life and development. Getting really saved in college and getting to know Christ and be around people that were encouraging me in that way, has really transformed, my entire life, my relationships, my marriage, my parenting, my coaching, the way I just interact with people on a daily basis. So for me, it's that at this level we're still developing young men into men, It's not a transaction piece where we're talking about how much do we have to pay you to come here for a year to win X number of games. We're talking about guys that are coming here to get a degree, that want to grow, that want to become the best man they can be. Because even though there's still opportunities to go pro, and we want that for these guys that can do that, but we're talking about a level where we're doing transformation for guys, to become men as they're going to leave to be better bosses, employees, husbands, fathers. So
Hmm.
um, I think we get to do a lot more here outside of basketball, and basketball is the tool that we have to connect with these players and say, hey, these are all the great things that you know how to do for basketball. How about you apply them to school? How about you apply that to relationships? How about you apply the work ethic and things you're willing to do for basketball to that job, and let's see how far you go. And so we just are able to have these much deeper, more meaningful relationships, because in a lot of cases they're able to last longer.
And something that's really cool about what it is that you said too is like the ability to really like get to know the players and really get a sense of like where they're going after they're done with basketball. Like really kind of dive into like the building of them as like people, and mentioned about like character building, and I think that's really like a great, side of college athletics that exists where you have these coaches who really pour into like their players as people, knowing that for, the vast majority of them, like this is it, though, after they're playing college, they're done, but like what their next step is or where they're going after that. And I think it's really awesome when like coaches like yourself like pour into that, because it's so important that, our players know and have like purpose after they're done playing basketball, seeing as it's taken up so much of their life up to this point.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think, we talk about a lot. I mean, small college basketball coaches, we've got to do everything, a little bit of everything. We don't have dobos, we don't have people doing that stuff for us. But the good thing is, we also don't have to do media availability. We don't have to go,
Hmm.
schmooze donors and do all this other stuff. Like we're doing a lot of work, but we're spending a lot of time with our team, and
Yeah.
able to invest deeply there. That um, as cool as it would be to be, and not to say that these coaches at these Power Five programs are not investing in players. I 100% believe they are, but we don't have to deal with some of the distractions that they deal with.
And that was going to be my like follow up to that about what about, this form of collegiate athletics may be appealing to coaches who may not have a lot of exposure, a lot of awareness about it. And that was kind of like a part of,
Yeah.
I think, what your part of your answer is, right? The microscope is a little bit different, right? And
Yeah.
what
So
you need
we're
to do.
we're everything to these guys. In a lot of cases, we're the admissions counselor, we're the guidance counselor, we're the academic, liaison. We're every, we're all of that for these guys. And so we get to know them on a lot of levels,
There's
and have
a
to
lot
be
of hats.
involved in a lot of things and a lot of hats too. And so I think for a lot of coaches that are trying to get into, you want to continue to grow and build up as well. Like small college is a great place to start, because you have to do a little bit of everything. Obviously the higher you go, the more you tend to specialize towards a role on a coaching
Hmm.
staff. And in small college, like you're gonna try everything once. You're gonna do a scouting report, you're gonna plan trips, you're gonna schedule games, you're gonna recruit players, you're gonna do player development.
Hmm.
Um, you're gonna do all of that. And so you can find out what it is you really like, what it is you're actually good at, and kind of continue to build, your own journey as a coach too. So it's a fun level.
Yeah, you talk about like getting experience in everything, right? Like you're going to know or have at least some awareness of how everything's done. So no, no, that's a great point too. It's really, really great to really like to have that much of an effect. Like you talk about like leading a program, right? That's what that is. Like you are the program person. You're not just coaching basketball. You are in charge, which is awesome.
For better
Um,
or worse. Yep.
well, that's great though. Shifting into the topic, coach, of getting everyone to buy into their roles. You mentioned when we first talked about how you want players to be elite at a skill. So I wanted to start with how do you kind of go through that process of identifying the skills that players will be elite at? What is that process of being able to identify, okay, this is what, we're going to get you or work with you to make sure that you're elite at this, particular skill, whatever it may be.
Yeah, I mean, I think, there's a couple different layers, couple different avenues for that. I mean, obviously for us, we do recruit and work with a lot of transfers, and so it's pretty obvious what it is that you're already good at, right?
Hmm.
Um, and helping them. be able to put them in positions to be successful. But I think for us, a lot of the freshman recruiting is kind of where we look at that and say, it's a lot of at that time, if you're a stud on your high school team, like you probably are able to do a little bit of everything. But what we are looking at when we're watching game film or we're talking with you and kind of doing this, what is it that you actually do? Because I think there's a lot of players that can do things. You hear a lot of,
Sure.
well, I can do this, I can do that. It's like, what is it that you actually do when you're out there? Like
Hmm.
when you're comfortable, when your team is playing well and you're helping them win, what is it that you're actually doing? Um, and trying to lean into that a little bit because the truth is obviously there's very few LeBron James, Luka Doncic type of guys who can do everything. They literally are the whole motor. You have to find what it is that you're good at and lean into that. And so, what I watch for on film is not the email says I can do this, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. Okay, but what is it that you do? And so when we can identify like this is what they're actually most comfortable with, or this is what they actually spend their time on. When guys go in and they want to work out in the gym, it's like, what are you doing? If you're shooting a lot of threes, if you're doing a lot of catch and shoot, that's what you're comfortable with your workout, then we probably better identify that as your role because you're not going to work on anything else on your free time. If
Yeah.
you're going in there and all you're doing is combo moves to get to mid-range and finishes and floaters and stuff, then you telling me like, hey, I'm a great shooter, it's like, well, you might be able to shoot, but what you actually want to do is get downhill and create a little bit because that's what you spend your time working on. So I think that's what we're looking for in the identification process is what is it that you're going to naturally be working on, or what is it that you naturally do when things are going well. And
Hmm.
then from there, obviously, we're going to lean into that and identify those roles and put them in positions to be successful. Um, because I think, like I said, that it's gonna be tough for. I mean, there's only one guy on a team and not that many guys, and not every team has a guy that does a little bit of everything at an
Right.
elite level, right? So these guys have to understand what it is they can bring to a team so we can all be in sync. We're going to have a guy that's going to get downhill and create, which means he's got to have shooters to kick to. So those guys have to, be synchronous, not against one another, where the shooter wants to get downhill and the creator wants to spot up in the corner. Like
Right.
we've got
Right.
to identify that and put them
Disconnect
in
there. Yeah.
yeah.
Are you then have do you have a certain, offensive system that you want to run and you're getting guys in who are going to fit that system, or are you looking at the skill set that your guys have and then designing a system around that? What is your philosophy with that?
I would say both. I'd say generally we have I wouldn't call it so much a system. Um, but we have a lot of principles and I'm big on spacing. So my thing is
Hmm.
are where are we at on the floor to allow these things to exist? So what we want to do with our spacing is create opportunities for the downhill guy to get downhill, create opportunities for the shooter to become open. Um, and so really what we're doing is we're saying, okay, these are the things we know we need. At this level, it's pretty, I mean, at some point you need somebody who can get a paint touch at will. Like there's got to be at least one guy that's going to be able to get to the paint and break down a defense.
Right.
But there also has to be shooters then for him to play with. Otherwise, he's not going to be able to do that. Or if he does, there's nothing for him to do. So I think for us, it's about building a roster that has complementary skill sets, not just a bunch of the same card. We got to have a full deck. And then from there, when we do have these players, we do build some of I don't want to say our system, but definitely our sets are going to be built around the best players getting them their best looks, as well as things we're going to emphasize they're going to be changing as the roster changes year to year. This past year we did have a guy who's capable and should be playing pro um, next year. Well, that's going to look different than if we don't have we're not going to have that replica player again next year. There's not going to be another
Right.
one of him that walks through the door. So we're going to have to kind of shift some of what our emphasis is. But we're still going to have a similar spacing, some similar actions. So we know for sure, like, hey, when we have a shooter, this is generally where he's going to be. This is generally where the creator is going to be. But then what are we going to emphasize, I think, is what's going to change year to year as the roster changes, or as these guys, get better and kind of expand their game.
And with that, I know it's probably always going to be different depending on who your guys are and the makeup of your team, but I guess in general, what is the process, or I guess the timetable, so to speak, of like getting the offense where you want it to be, getting these guys who have these different skill sets, right? Year after year, it's always going to be different. What's kind of that timetable of kind of implementing the offense where you get the guys where you want and you're going through, the looks that you want to get and the sets that you want to go? How long would you say it kind of takes for the offense to really start to flow and the guys to really start playing off each other and playing to their strengths?
I think it's one of those things that it is a year to year thing still.
Yeah.
It's a bad answer, but it's, how many
No, it's
returners do
true.
we have back? How many key players have been around? That matters. But I think for us, we run, I mean, it's a ball movement, player movement, motion, read and react style of offensive system. And so some guys do pick it up faster than others. Um, but I would say, we try to keep the playbook pretty minimal in the early going. Um, Keep it simple, keep some of the choices minimized early, so that we can still be efficient. And then as the year goes on, as people are scouting us, then that's kind of when our stuff opens up and is expanded, but our guys are more comfortable. So, I mean, in general, like typically our offense does peak in January, February. Like we want to be playing our
Hmm.
best basketball at the end of the season. So that's been pretty normal for us, is that early on, maybe we're not scoring at the rate that we'd like to. That happens from time to time. That happens most years where for us, where it's like early on, it's a little bit more of a slugfest on defense. We're really grinding a little bit more, and then as we get into that second semester, things are really clicking. We do tend to have better offensive games and performances, and put ourselves in position, um, when it matters most.
And this process, does this exist in the same level on the defensive end? Because it's obviously skill sets are on offense. It's much different than necessarily defense. So when you're getting guys to kind of buy in and be able to be successful, whatever your role is in what you run defensively, I imagine then that kind of process is probably a little bit quicker for them to kind of gel and kind of come together as a defense. Am I right in thinking that?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think so. I mean, obviously, that's one of the first things that we're going to emphasize every year is defense, because if you can't guard anybody, it's not really going to matter.
Hmm.
If you score 90 and give up 100, it still didn't help very much. So
Yeah.
we're definitely going to start on that defensive end, and I think the thing with defense is it's simpler. I mean, it's really, I mean, for us, the principles are a lot simpler. They're a lot more cut and dry as well. It's like if you've you know right? I mean, the old sayings are true. If you can't guard anybody, you can't play anyway. Um, the position that you can play is the position that you can guard. So a lot of these, we talk to a lot of guys. They're like, "Well, I want to be a two." It's like, "Well, you can only guard four. So sorry, man. Like, you either can't play a two or you're gonna have to learn to play a four."
Something's got to change
Um,
here. Yeah.
yeah, so something's not connecting. So that part's pretty easy. And for us on that end, we're, playing man to man. It's there's a lot of stuff that's quite simple there. I mean, everybody's got their own little nuances to a man to man defense and communication pieces, but generally speaking, I mean, for us, it breaks down to 3 to 5 things. I mean, off the top of my head, I mean, number one that we're always going to be on is communication, right? If you can't communicate, then it's not going to work. But that's a universal fact
You
for
know.
defense and
Hmm.
on all of basketball, right? So that doesn't take very long to figure out. Um, the big thing for us is closeouts. We're a huge closeout team. We want to close out well, because if you close out well, then you take away shots and you don't need help. So we're going to be all over closeouts and just drilling that to death. Um, and then kind of
Yeah.
the effort, and a lot of times rebounding might be a sub point effort, maybe it's its own point, but the effort and rebounding pieces are, again, fairly universal, and they're a lot more of yes or no boxes versus, hey, let's talk about how you can show effort. It's, well, you either are or
Hmm.
you aren't. So for us, our defense usually is there right away. I mean, that's a huge emphasis, and then we're going to build on that as the year goes on. Our practices are going to shift from, I mean, maybe defensive heavy, or at worst 50-50, to defense is going to be a lot more of refreshers and specific to scouting report. And we're going to spend a lot more time on offense because that's got to continue to grow and evolve as the year goes on.
Right? Because like your defense really has to be doing a lot of the heavy lifting, I guess, in the sense of the offense is taking its time and it's going to take longer to
It
figure it
just,
out. So
yeah,
you need the defense to be like solid and in place to kind of keep you in games and keep you going when the offense is kind of disjointed or maybe not perfect. And then, hopefully it all, like you said, is peaking in January and February. Where now, okay, now the offense is caught up to speed. Now we're playing well on both levels.
absolutely. And I think too, like I said, it's universal, right? Like
Yeah.
if you're gonna be a guard, like we've had, for example, two guards. We've had two guards that are more downhill and great finisher athlete types. We've had two guards that are a lot more of catch and shoot guys, coming off taking,
Mhm.
a lot of threes. Well, both of them have to play the same on the defensive end. So as we're figuring out how it is that those, each one of those guys is going to fit in, they both have to guard. So,
Yeah.
on that front, like it comes together faster. We have to make those decisions. Sometimes that's the thing that helps us make a decision on which guy to go with. Because there's a lot of ways offenses are effective. Whether you're a great 3-point shooting team or you're great at getting to the paint or you're ball movement or an isolation, like there's a million ways to be successful in offense. Defense is a little bit clearer. You have to play really hard and you have
Yeah.
to have a certain level of athleticism, and
Yep.
that can be the differentiator. And if we can get guys to do that early, then they're more willing to learn and grow and develop the offensive stuff later. If you focus on offense early, sometimes it's too late to get that defensive edge back. So
Right.
we're definitely going to start there and basically bank on the fact that if we can convince guys to play defense, then they're generally going to figure it out on offense.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. They lend to each other. If you had situations where guys believe that, this is going to be like what my role is because I think I'm really good at this. Like for example, if you have a guy who's like, I'm really good at like, I drive and I get into penetration, but they're not as good as like other players are, and so then their role has to be changed. Have you had conversations where guys maybe think they're a leader, their role is going to be this, but you actually need them to be doing something else? And if so, like how do those conversations go with players?
Those are probably the hardest ones.
Hmm.
Those are probably the hardest ones. And that happens, it happens every year because you'll have guys who are like, well, I'm really good at this. And it's like, yeah, you are. Like you said, I think it happens a lot at the guard spot, because there's a couple different ways to play guard spots, right? They're like, well, I'm better at this than this guy. It's like you are, but you're not as good at this one thing that we need. So
Yeah.
we have that a lot with, there's a lot of times, hey, the lead guard, that's easy. Yeah, he's the best player. That's fine. We don't have any problems with him playing. But,
Hmm.
player B thinks they should be playing over player A because they're better than player A at, like you said, getting downhill. They're a better finisher. They're quicker. They get downhill better. Um, but the truth is, because of the lead guard being who he is, we need player A shooting. So that's why he's playing. He's not playing to get downhill. He's playing to shoot.
Right.
Whereas that's why he's playing over you. And that's really hard for guys. Those are some of the toughest conversations because, often sounds a lot like, hey, in a different year on a different team, you probably are on the floor. But for this team at this time, we need what he brings to the table. Um, and that's, like I said, those conversations go one of two ways. Guys get that, they buy in, they stay ready, they help us every day at practice because, if you're playing against guys that should be or could be playing for your opponents, like you're going to be more ready. Or those guys get really frustrated and you've got to address that side of things. But those are conversations we have to have every year, especially at this level where everybody's recruited. You know, it's like we're trying to bring in 15 guys that can play. I
Yeah.
don't, you don't want somebody in a roster. It's like, I would never play him. That doesn't make you very good.
No.
But there's always going to be those conversations as the team comes together. And I think too, the other one that gets into the way is it's the defense versus offense piece a lot, especially with, I don't know, maybe not especially with the guards, but it feels like I have more of those conversations with the guards of I'm a way better defender than him. And you talk about how good our defense needs to be. Again,
Hmm.
true. But somebody has to create spacing. If you're shooting 24% from three and he's shooting 39% from three, we're probably going to be willing to give up the 10% of the defense for the 15% on the three pointer. That's going to change a lot of
Right.
things.
Just yeah, just
Um,
mathematically, yeah. Just
and
percentages.
so it's a that those are tough. It's tough for guys to see because they're right. I'm better than him at this, but you might not be making the team better by putting you out there. And
Right.
that's a really hard thing for guys to find.
And to have those conversations where like you have that though, and to keep guys still like engaged and keep guys still like positive and as good teammates, that's I think as a coach one of the trickier things to kind of navigate is you have this tough conversation where the player isn't getting, what it is that they were hoping to get, but you still need them to be obviously a part of the team. You still need them to be positive. You still need them to be a good teammate. You still need them to be ready when their time is called upon. And I think that to successfully have that conversation is something that is a lot easier said than done. It sounds like, but you have to
Oh
do it.
yeah,
Yeah, and you have to make sure that you're checking in on those guys because that guy, you know this too. If he goes sideways or he starts checking out or whatever, it could really affect the whole team really bad.
definitely. And I think obviously too. Like I remember going to some coaches clinics when I was coaching high school, and listening to the college coaches too, and they're always saying that. And it's, but I'm sitting there going like, yeah, but you get to recruit those guys. You get to pick your players. It's like, yeah, we do. It doesn't make it a lot easier. Like we're
No,
still gonna have the same conversations. And I think, obviously we are able to pick them, but at the high school level, you're gonna wrestle with that, and you need guys ready because it's you never know when it's going to be an injury, when there's going to be a grade thing, when somebody's going to have a family issue and
it
they're going to have to
happens.
take a step out or a step back, and that player that wasn't playing is now going to get his chance. And so I think one of the things that we work really hard to do in recruiting, and obviously this is the difference between the college and the high school thing, is at the college level, we're going to recruit players that we think we align on the fact that winning is the most important thing, whether or not they're playing or whether or not they're scoring, that everybody wants to win the game more than anything. High school's a lot harder because a lot of those kids are still trying to
Hmm.
chase that next dream of getting to play in college. So it's going to be a little tougher for a high school kid in some cases to buy into, well, I'll play less so the team can win more, because that often means they're not going to have opportunities to be seen, to be recruited, to be
Be
whatever.
recruited. Yeah.
Um, so I know, as a former high school coach, I remember that being a lot tougher uh, to hear, because it's like I can't convince a kid of that he's going to leave, transfer, quit, whatever.
Yeah.
And here we have a little bit more pull, a little bit more ability to get that conversation back to, hey, the goal is to win, and so for us to win, that means you're going to have to continue to know everything to be ready in case we call your name, but ultimately you're going to have to make us better every day at practice. It is probably easier to do at the college level to convince kids of that than it is at high school, but
Well, you have the
that's the
other like
point.
interesting dynamic of, it talks about player buy-in. I wasn't even like thinking about this till you brought it up though, is when you do recruit freshmen, you're going to have players that, right, that get recruited who maybe were like the star of their team and they were the primary ball handler, they did everything, and that's why they had the ability to, be seen at the collegiate level, and now they're going to go to a collegiate program with a lot of other skilled players and now they might be on the bench and they might not, be used to like that sort of like limited minutes or not being the primary ball handler, not being like the star player, and to get somebody who is still bought into like whatever their role is, even if it's going to be a lot different than even what it looked like when they were, doing really well in high school. That isn't always easy to do either, I know.
No, that's really tough. That's probably those are probably some of the harder recruiting conversations to have as
Hmm.
well. Is just saying like, look, yeah, I know you were 20 and 6 and 5 in high school, but honestly, man, I don't see you playing that first year. That's always
Yeah.
hard for those guys to hear.
Yeah.
Um, and that's where, like I said, that helps us though define the guys who really want to win versus the guys who just like to play.
Hmm.
And that
So
at the
people want to
college
win, yeah.
level is a difference maker between teams that seriously are going 8-20, whatever, and teams that are flipping that record and going winning 20 plus games in a season. It's everybody has talented players, but what do the players care most about? Do they want to
Yeah.
just play the game or do they want to win the game? And I think that is
Right.
a huge differentiator in college athletics for
Yeah,
sure.
no, definitely to have them all bought in for a common goal for sure. Will, in your experience, do players' roles potentially change throughout the year or even from year to year? And if these roles potentially will change, how do you kind of like talk to your players and make sure that they're, flexible and they're able to succeed and they're able to, perform their role regardless of wherever they are on the court?
Definitely. Well, I think within the year, it's a little rarer for the roles to change or to change dramatically, I would say. Um, just because it's tough to really, go from being okay or able to elite at a skill you know, within a season.
Hmm.
The off season is when a lot of that happens, but I do think that um you have to be flexible with that, especially based on, like I said, injury or grades or family situation or something like that. Guys are always going to have to step up and be ready to adjust. Um, but the year to year is where we see a lot of that change, and I think for us, it's a lot of about the open dialogue and the honest communication, where said we're saying, hey, this is what the role is right now. This is why. Um, if you want to change that, this is what you've got to do. And those guys that are willing to put in the work and make that so can continue to grow and elevate their game and become that next player. And add things to their game that they need. Sometimes, like I said, there's a differentiator. If you guys are two shooters are shooting about the same percent from three, but one's a far better, um, you know, we call it a counter move or whatever, but they're able to attack that closeout better and more
Hmm.
efficiently. Like they end up playing more, right? So it's pretty obvious what this other player needs to work on, and doesn't mean they have to do it the same way. It just means they have to be able to do something that can help us to get them in that situation. Um, so that conversation is happening all the time for us. Early on, we're talking about roles and identifying what it is guys are going to be doing, and that question always comes up. Well, how do I do this? How can I be allowed to do this, or how does that fit in with what the team is looking
Right.
for? And that's where we say, that's going to be your individual workouts. Like, what are you doing to better yourself to make that possible? And then how are you taking advantage of the off season? Because like we talked about earlier, if all you're going to do is go in and do the same workout that you've been doing forever, then you're really not going to change.
Hmm.
So you're willing to do something different. Are you willing to get uncomfortable? Are you willing to do something that's hard for you, or something that you don't naturally like to get the thing you want most? That could be any number of things. Like I said, some guys, they really like attacking the paint because they're great jumpers and they've always thought it was fun to dunk, but they can't shoot. So it's like,
Yeah,
all
yeah.
right, man, like this is it. Like this is what you're gonna have to do. Or a more common one is the weight room. It's like, look, you can't guard. You're every time somebody gets within 6 feet of the hoop, it's an and one. Like you're
It's an
gonna
and
have
one.
to get stronger.
Yeah.
Um, those are the things that you're going to have to do different. You can't do the same workout routine you've been doing and eat the same way you've been doing. You're going to have to eat a bigger diet and put on a little bit of muscle and give us a chance here to get you on the floor. So, yeah, I think, like I said, it's all about just that constant communication and being really honest too. I think
Yeah.
I know it's hard
Open
because
and
you don't want
honest.
to open honest. You don't want to crush dreams. I mean, that's not what none of us do this to crush dreams or to ruin confidence. We know how important that is, but there has to be a level of honesty there. Otherwise, somebody's feelings are going to get hurt anyway.
And yeah, I mean, well, like, yeah, and it's much worse, right? If you didn't have that conversation, right? If you weren't
Yeah.
honest or you weren't like open or upfront about it. You reminded me of like a couple years ago when I was having like these meetings, right? Similar to how you do with players, and I think back to, one of the players I talked to who was like, yes, I gave her like, hey, we got to do X, Y, and Z. Like, these are the things you need to work on in order to, potentially see more playing time. And then I remember I ended that conversation by saying, just realize though that the people that you might want to play over are also doing the same things. So you may put in
Yeah.
all this effort and do all of this stuff, but if the other person is doing the same thing and they're also getting just as better, then I don't know, right? Like it's
Nope.
hard. Those are hard when it's like, yes, you put in all this work, but so did this other person and they were already ahead of you. So like here you are almost in your same role, but you have gotten better. You are going to help the team more, but on an individual, maybe like a playing time basis or whatever the case, that role may not necessarily change. I know that's always been tough for me when those conversations have had to happen.
Yeah. Well, I think that one's yeah, that's up there too because you're saying, hey, and kind of the language we use a lot is like, look, you doing this does not guarantee you get what you want, but I can guarantee you if you don't do this, you
Mm,
won't get what you want.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's the language, right?
That's the way.
So,
Yeah. You don't do it, there is no shot, right? It's give
I
yourself a
promise you won't
chance.
play or you won't be able to do this. But if you do, that doesn't
Yeah,
mean you get to.
and that kind of like goes back to like those life skills, I think, and things that we were talking about earlier. This idea of like you put in this work and you put in this effort, and it may not, necessarily get you exactly what you want at this particular point, but if you always approach everything with that mindset, more doors are going to open for you than not. And it's kind of like that life lesson of like just put in
Absolutely.
the work and everything, and opportunities will eventually open itself because of that. So there's that
Absolutely.
as well. Coach, what is your like kind of practice plan in terms of ways that you are incorporating players improving their role, refining their role, getting better at their role? How do you kind of plan your practices with that sort of thing in mind to get your players that much better at whatever their role is?
Yeah. I think one of the things that we do, and it's not something we're able to do every day at practice, but some of the times what we try to do with some skill breakdown stuff at practice is put guys in groups based on role. Um, I think we're all familiar, a lot of guards and bigs, but from there we try to break it down in even smaller groups of our guards, who are our downhill guys, who are our catch and shoot guys, who are our on the move shooting guys. And sometimes, you've got we play a very perimeter. I mean, we're a lot of 5 out or 4 out, 1 in. So even with our bigs, it's like which ones of the bigs are the rip downhill guys and which one of the bigs are the catch and shoot guys.
Hmm.
And so we're doing a lot of our skill stuff based on roles. So guys are getting the looks they're supposed to get in a game. Um, we do a lot of game like reps with our skill breakdown because like I said we need them to be elite at the thing they're supposed to do. I don't necessarily in December and January, I don't necessarily need my best catch and shoot guy worrying so much about how to split a ball screen. Like that's just
Yeah,
not
yeah.
something he's going to be practicing because I don't care right now. He's going to be practicing how to get open when somebody
Hmm.
else is splitting the ball screen. So I think we're going to do that. We do a lot of that. And within everything we're doing, I mean, a lot of our stuff is competitive and live. And so we're talking about putting guys in positions to be successful all the time. We do the simple 3-on-2 with the chaser. We're always on guys like who should be bringing the ball up the floor, which one of you should be running to the rim, and which one of you should be spotting up. Everything that we're doing, focusing on what it is you do for us. This is not practice, is not the time for you to try to do something that you don't do for us, I guess, is what I would say is practice is the time for you to do the thing that we've told you we need you to be really great at. And your
Hmm.
individual work, the time you're in the gym on your own, that's the time to expand your game. But at practice, you need to be practicing what we've said your role is or what it would be should you be on the court. So um, I think it's just trying to make sure that we're maximizing our time connected to the role and minimizing time that guys are playing out of position or I don't want to say wasting their time, but doing reps that really aren't consequential at this exact moment.
Yeah. And so it's important then that like we talked about these deliberative conversations that you're going to have, that like players are fully aware of like, hey, like when we're doing team stuff, when we're in practice situations, you need to be you're this is what you is expected of you. This is what you're doing, right? Where that you got it, we got to get this down. And if you have players, right, who are excuse me, team oriented, that shouldn't be a problem, right? They should be like, all right,
Right.
we're good. We're good. We can do that sort of thing.
Yeah, and that's like I said, it's pretty easy at this level for them to understand that. They're most case fairly used to that. Like I said, I'll go back to that 3-on-2 with a chaser. Like that's a drill that most levels do because it's fun, it's engaging. You work on a ton of skills, but like I'm ripping a 4 or 5 man if he's bringing the ball up the middle of the floor with our starting point guard out there with him. Like that's just stupidity. At that point, it's like make sure that man gets the basketball,
Hmm.
and then figure out what you're doing. Or our guys, kind of our general principle on a 3-on-2 is we've got the ball coming up the floor and we've got one guy. We want one guy putting pressure on the rim and one guy spacing. So force that defense to choose. Well, if our big is the one who decides to space or whatever, the lesser 3-point shooter is the one who decides to space and puts one of our better shooters on the rim cut, kind of like, again, know who's on the floor with you. And so
Right.
we'll stop practice and talk about that. And basically these guys have to face facts of like, all right, yeah, I was doing what I wanted to do versus what we need to do. Um, and I think that keeps us in check a lot.
Yeah, I mean, you have to continually kind of reinforce the things that you want to be doing in games, right? The things that you're running on offense, and it's easy, I think, to get disjointed or have things kind of like get away from you in like in a practice sort of setting if they are like making, a lot of decisions or they have like a lot of independence or freedom, which in a case you do want, but you want them to be making the right decisions, right? You want them to like be
Absolutely.
implement doing things correctly, and so they do need to kind of hear that. How much of your practices, coach, how much is it, how much, I guess, decision making and competition, like how much of that, like percentage wise, of terms of like how much competing you're doing or how much players need to make decisions in practice, is there like a consistent like percentage that you stay if, and how much of that exists in your practices?
I think as the year goes on, it would grow.
Mm-hmm.
I can't say that. I mean, early on, obviously, we're gonna be breaking things down where there's maybe fewer reads, or no reads. We're gonna tell them exactly what we want. But I would say as the year goes on, you get into that, like I said, middle of the year, December, January stuff. Like it's mostly live looks, and we're talking about a very small percentage where we're saying, hey, this is exactly what you need to do. Um,
Yeah.
and there's very few things at that point in time that don't have some form of competition metric. Early on, maybe we're getting a feel for things or we're learning how to do stuff. We're gonna some ways stay away from intense competition, but even a shooting drill, like we know what mark we should be at, and we're competing against a mark, or we're competing against a group, or competing against a control of some kind. Um, I would say the few times that maybe we would again go back to less decision making would be when we're doing something very specific on a scout. um, where if the scouting report is something that this team does this 100% of the time, then we're going to take other options off the table because we know for sure what we're going to need to go, what we're going to need to do, in a skill breakdown. So like ball screen coverage would be an example. Like we'll do a lot
Mm-hmm.
of stuff where the ball screen stuff is fairly live, or we'll tell the scout, we'll tell whatever the defense, like you can switch or not switch, like we don't care. Um, but as we prepare for a scouting report, we know exactly what the other team's going to do, whether they're going to switch 100% of the time or they're going to blitz this ball screen or whatever. Then we're going to take that decision off the table for the guys and make it very clear what it is we want to rep. And I think that's, like I said, that's
Yeah.
fairly rare as the season goes on. In most cases, it's pretty live because it's dynamic. I mean, we're not just practicing skills, we're practicing decision making, right?
Decision
So
making, yeah.
um,
Yeah.
it's going to be pretty high percentage.
So with the scouting, there's a whole bunch of ways to do it, and you kind of alluded to it, so I wanted to make sure I asked you about it. About, each scout's going to be a little bit different. Each team that you're up against is going to be a little bit different. So the expectations in terms of what players need to specifically be looking to do, or what their emphasis is, or what they're going to be asked to do, may change a little bit from game to game, situation to situation. So what's your process of kind of scouting and also kind of communicating the scout and making sure that your players kind of understand, hey, this is what we need to really emphasize in this particular game?
Yeah, I mean, scouting has been something that I've always enjoyed. It's something that I was maybe, prone to a little bit as a player. I like that.
Hmm.
And then as an early coach, that was one of the things I was tasked with right away was scouting reports. Um, as a young coach. So that's something I've always just done, and I do enjoy it. Makes me feel confident on the sideline knowing the scout, and so I still right now I've got some assistants that are fantastic at it, and so I'm maybe watching a little less than I used to have to. But we're going over the scout like there's no way that the staff does not know the scout top to bottom and feel good about it. So I think when we present it, we have a scouting report template, whatever that we use, and language that we use, and codings and whatever for guys to know what they're looking at as far as what caliber of shooter a guy is, or what type of shooter, or what go-to moves and all that fun stuff. But on On all of our scouts is a section of what are our keys on offense and defense. We try to keep about three. What
Okay.
are the three most important things to emphasize on each side of the ball? Um, and so we're going over that in scouting report meetings. We're showing clips to deeply emphasize that. And as necessary, we're going to have some of those talking points to our guys on what their role might look like specifically in this case. There's times where it's like, hey, you're about the only guy who can guard this player. So your rest is when his rest is, not when it normally is. That's going to
Hmm.
be one adjustment. Or we've talked about, they like to play really big. So we're going to try out one of two is we're going to try out matching size. We're going to try out playing small and see if we can force them into a bad spot. As a part of the game plan, talking to some of the guys about, um, like I said, matchups. Like we've got, I think one of the ones that comes to mind is late, in the conference tournament, we had a matchup where we felt like one of the things that we needed to have was more shooting on the floor, which meant us going small,
Hmm.
despite them having despite the fact that might mean a on paper mismatch against a big. But one of our shooters he was short, but he was strong, and we told him, look, man, there's a very real chance you're gonna guard their 5-man tonight, for a small stretch, and I'm not so worried about anything except for you boxing him out. And just putting it in
Yeah.
guys' ears, like your role might look just a little bit different. So make sure that tendencies, or what is going to be expected of you if we put you in this abnormal situation.
Well, like the way that you have that conversation with a player too, it sounds like it's really important and something that you've kind of alluded to is like you're not telling a player like what differences or adjustments they have to make in a way that like you're concerned. It's just like, hey, like I already know you got this skill set. I already know you can do this. Like just use your strength, right? Or just, you may have to
Yep.
do like X, Y, and Z a little bit more, but like it's not an issue. I already know that you can take care of that and do that. Just letting you know. And you kind of put your players at ease, like, okay, like I just gotta do this, but like I know I can do this, right? And versus like, hey, we got to blow something up or do everything like that's out of normal, or I'm concerned you can't do this, and we got to really work on this. Like the way that you kind of approach that conversation, I think can really like ease a player's like mind and make them think, oh, no big deal. I just got to do this a little bit differently.
Definitely. Definitely. And I think too, like we like to have those conversations privately, but we also like to at least allude to it to the whole team as well. Because one of the other things that happens, if like part of your game plan as a coaching staff, if you're like, hey, one thing we think we need to do is go small or go with shooters or whatever, the players, if they recognize, they're like, wait a minute, none of our 5s are on the floor. What's coach doing? Um, other people freak out and they cross match incorrectly or whatever. And so, in any major situation, we do like to let the team know, like, hey, this is one thing we're looking for, and this is why. I think that can be helpful. And other cases where it's smaller, it's just like, hey, this is going to be your matchup, but just remember, like, he literally, does not want to shoot that 3. So no matter how many times he shot fakes, it's okay to close
Don't
out
go for
short.
it.
Like we're okay. We're okay with that.
Yeah.
If he hits one, don't think you're coming out. Like we told you, we know. Or something like that where that's not a whole team conversation. That's just the one guy conversation. But if there's something that we want to attack or exploit, we're having the private conversation. We're doing it at the scouting report meeting. We're probably going to do quick reminders at shoot around. At our shoot arounds, I like to, towards the end of shoot around, have guys just work on, we call it confidence shooting or rhythm shooting. Just get shots up to make them feel good. Um,
Yeah.
and kind of pulling guys one at a time and just reminding them of what the role is or what the expectation is, or, keep in mind for tonight what we need from you, sort of thing. And I think that's, hitting it at multiple times, typically leads to a better outcome.
All right, and these aren't like, from what I'm gathering from what you're saying, these aren't like super in-depth, like long, complicated conversations, right? These are like quick, like bites of information, little things they got to do, and then like you said, you're periodically reminding them of it, but you're not like over flooding them with like all these complications and all these
No,
nuances and stuff, because I think that's our job, right? We got to take all the information that we get from a scout and like funnel that into something that is easily digestible for our players. They
Right.
don't need to know all the things that we saw or did. I mean, I think I've been in that situation before where I had all of this like information and stats and this, that, and I was like gonna tell my girls all of it. And it's just like they don't need any of that. Like they just need like the things that are relevant to them that they need to do or be aware of in that moment, and then we're good, right? Like the way that
Yep.
you communicate, how much you communicate, because I think there's definitely a something to be said for almost like over communicating or saying too much to your players, and now they're thinking about the scout or what you said and all the stuff you said versus like just playing their game and being aware of those couple little things that you brought to their attention.
Definitely. And it comes back to relationships too, because you know
Hmm.
what players can handle what, and how what players get, will get in their own heads and overthink if you give them too much information. What players, if you don't give enough information to, have weird anxiety about it. So you're just knowing the players and knowing what it is that puts them in position to be successful. And that's something that unfortunately, you know, we have to find out the hard way sometimes. There was times this year where it was like, I thought I should share this much or not this much with a
Hmm.
guy, and they went out and they did not execute very well. And it was like, okay, so I guessed wrong. This guy needs
Hmm.
more or this guy needs less.
Yeah, each player is gonna be a little bit different, right? Like you said,
Yep.
I have a girl now who, like, she'll study film. Like, I think she's gonna be a coach one day because she's a great student and everything like that. She studies for everything, and if you give her film, like, she will watch it like intently, and she wants to know all this stuff though. Like, she wants to know like everything, and I'm like, hey, that's great. Like, you're all in it. And there's others who's just like, hey, just tell me a few things and I'm good. Or everyone's a little bit different for sure.
Yep.
Um, to wrap up, Coach, there's a couple questions that I ask every guest. So I'm going to go ahead and start with this first one, which is thinking back on your coaching career. What is a specific moment from your coaching career that you think by sharing it, our listeners would be able to learn from?
Yeah, so I think I'll go back to the one we kind of already addressed. That's kind of what I wrote down is to be bold. I think I've fell victim to it before where you think you have to do something a certain way, or you're a little bit afraid, if I do this and it doesn't work, I'm going to look so silly that it's not worth it. But
Hmm.
I think sometimes you're going to have to be bold in coaching. And so, like I said, for example, one thing that we did in the conference tournament is against a team who was very big and very strong, and that was their advantage. We chose to go small, quick, and shooting, and we just gave these guys, a couple guys, the opportunity to guard much bigger than they typically do. Um, and they understood the mission, and went out and executed at a really high level and made us look really, really smart. Um, but I think that there was times earlier in my coaching career where I was so afraid of doing where our team was actually going to be, what I thought our team was going to be most successful at, because it would look so funny to somebody else. Like, had it not worked, it would have been like I would have been second guessed so much. But at the same time, it's like I kind of had to come to the realization: would I rather second guess myself after a loss, or have somebody else second guess what we thought was best? Like,
Mm,
I'd rather, I was like, I think our room knows this team better than
yeah.
somebody else does. So we're going to go ahead and be bold and do the thing that we think puts us in position to be successful. And, um, with that, you don't have to be like foolish. You can test the waters. Like I said, we like to test the waters in the first half. We like to see, find a spot to check out a little bit of zone defense just to see what they might do to it, or if it's effective, or try a certain matchup or lineup. So that when things get tight late or whatever, and we have a feeling for what could come, or we know what to talk about in that timeout before we go out and do it. But I would encourage coaches to be bold. There's only, you know, there's so many ways to be successful. Um, you don't have to do what somebody else has done. You have to do what's best for your team.
Yeah, go. Yeah, I completely agree. I always hate that feeling of like wondering like if I could have done something, right? Or if I like, ooh, like what if I had done this, right? Like that's like go do it, right? Go do it and try it and see if it works. Cause it's just like that feeling. Oh, should I have like tried this? Cause like I feel like as you kind of alluded to in the back of your mind, it's like you know you should have, right? You know you should have done that thing or
Right.
gone for that thing, and nobody knows your team better than you. I love that too. Trust me, I've had some parents in the past who I think they know my team better, or other people who think they might know my team better than me. But no, like be confident in yourself. I love that. Coach, to wrap up, I love to give every guest what I like to call a 60-second soapbox. You can go over 60 seconds though, but I like to use it to kind of allow you to have a final message, a closing thought, a final idea, just something that you would like to leave the listeners with. You could take it any direction that you want, basketball wise, coaching wise, whatever. It's your soapbox after all. So, Coach, I'm going to go ahead and just open up the floor for you here and just kind of let you take it from here.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that opportunity. Well, one thing that I just want to plug real briefly is again that Carolina University is a Christian university, and I have had the privilege to coach at one and play at coach at two Christian universities rather and play at another. And um, something that we talk about is again being bold in our faith and just saying like, hey, we think that there's something special about that, and just to encourage people to explore that and be willing, especially young players. If a Christian school is calling, you don't have to have all the answers. You just have to be willing to learn and grow. And so that's what we want from all of our students and all of our players here, is to be open to that and give yourselves a chance to learn and grow and find somebody to mentor and coach you up in that way. Because there's a lot of special people and special things that happen at those universities. And, I've had those recruiting questions and conversations with players who say, hey, I don't know anything about this. And it's like, you don't have to know. You don't have to have all the answers. You just have to be willing to grow. And so I think as coaches, we definitely want that on the floor, but I would encourage, if any young people were listening, to do that, and coaches as well, to connect with maybe other other coaches that they know at faith-based institutions to help answer those questions. But on a basketball standpoint, I think we touched on this once, and I want to hit it again. There's a big difference between hoopers and college basketball players. Hoopers just like to play, and college basketball players want to win. Know the difference. Know the difference, young men and women. If you just want to play, intramurals is great. City leagues are great. But if you want to play college basketball, it means you've got to put winning above your own aspirations, and it's okay to acknowledge that. It is okay to say, hey, I actually just want to play and I don't want to get subbed out. Intramurals are for you. If you're saying I want to win games and be in pressure moments where somebody gets to hit a shot and it may or may not be me, then you've found yourself into competitive college athletics. So I'm seeing a lot of that with recruiting right now. Guys are saying, I'm a hooper. I just want to play, coach. Well, the YMCA is in fact open. If you want to win, though, then call us.
Huge difference, right? Huge difference. No, that's great. I love that, Coach. Coach, again, really appreciate you coming on here talking about getting players to buy into their role, talking about what you just talked about, players who want to win versus players who want to play, faith-based institutions, small college athletics, and just offense, defense, all the stuff, tons of stuff that we covered. And it's crazy
Yeah.
how an hour just flows by just like that when you're talking about something as awesome as that. Really appreciate it. I know you're navigating a lot right now here in the off season, a lot of uncharted waters right now at the university level of sports. But Coach, appreciate it. Best of luck going forward, and thank you so much for coming on here and
Yeah.
chatting with us.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity. It's a lot of fun.
Thank you guys so much for listening. This was another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. We will see you guys next time.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Make sure to connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Take care, be safe, and we'll see you next time.